Okay. I'm looking. Hope everything is fine. This week we are going to speak about Okanran. So give me just a second. I'm gonna go grab my materials and I'll be right back. Those pellets, the pellets in the little pink and white bag. All right, forgive me for keeping everybody on hold for that long, but I, for some reason, didn't look where I initially had placed my materials. So we are continuing work on the Merindilogun Oracle for this beginning of the year. When in the wrong place. The beginning of the oracle, of the Didogun oracle, is actually Okanran, and I started with Oak Bay. So I mentioned that before, but that was my own personal error. Now, let me make sure that I can be heard because I was having some trouble with my live stream that I did earlier this week. And it looks like there's a lag. So I'm not sure, you guys. I hope I don't have a virus on this laptop because this is the one that I use for school. But we're gonna jump in. If there's a problem, I'll pause it on here and I'll actually start it up on the tablet. So I just checked in with the people that live here in Nashville to ask them if I could be heard and seen okay. So I'm gonna wait and hear back from them, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about Okanran. Let me just pause right here. I have written two books on the tradition, Isheshe, of the Yoruba people. So, two things I have to say. The first thing I have to say is that Yoruba, as I have said, been saying for years, is not the name of this ethnic group of people. Hold on, y'all. Let me turn this light off. They killing me with this light bill, so I got to stay up on it, y'all. But anyway, this particular ethnic group of people did not call themselves Yoruba. That was a name given to them by outsiders, which means the people of Oyo, the people of the Oyo Empire. The Oyo Empire, more modern empires that this group of people created. So that is why they currently are known as Yoruba and have been known as Yoruba for the past few centuries. But the name that this group of people called themselves was Anago. So when you find roots of this tradition throughout the West and throughout the Americas, then you generally find it under the name of Nago, Nago. And the group of people call themselves the Anago, Anago. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing, as I have said before, this is, and well, let me go back to what I was saying before. The reason I'm referencing my books is because I cover this topic in great detail in my book, Ona Agbani, Onagbani, can be purchased on Amazon. And I cover this topic in great detail because the fight that I usually see, the conflict that I usually see, is based totally and completely in ignorance. Before we move into our lesson. So, when we look at the enslavement of West African people, the enslavement generally was based upon countries that were fighting, empires that were fighting, nations that were fighting each other. So originally, the enslavement of African people began with the fall of the old Mali Empire. So the original Africans to come over to this side as enslaved people, because Africans came to this side of the world before enslavement. But the original people to come over to this side as enslaved people came from the fall of the old Mali Empire. So beginning way, way back in the 11th century was when people first began to be brought over here from enslavement, African people. The people that were originally brought were the Malinke people. So these are Senegambian people. So the people that were originally brought were due to the fall or the repercussions of the fall of the old Mali Empire. Okay, that's when it began. As slavery continued, then you have different groups of people being brought. Okay, so there is a period very heavy in Ghanaian people being brought. If you are from Jamaica, you probably have very heavy period of Ghanaian people being brought when there was a fight in that area. There was a very heavy period of brothers and sisters from the Angola, from the Congo region, okay, being brought. If you are from the Low Country, then you probably have Congolese and Angolan ancestry. This is where our Palo tradition comes from. A very, very strong ancestral tradition, very powerful, very serious tradition, comes from those particular people, has strong roots amongst those particular people. And so, because there was a time when those people were fighting, several empires in that area were fighting amongst themselves. And so, people from those empires were being captured by Europeans and being brought over during the enslavement process. Okay, so it began with the old Mali Empire. So you have the Malinke, you have the Wolof, you have the Mandinka. Those are particular empires of people, particular nations of people. Okay, so this was the beginning. Okay, moving forward, you have a time period for Ghana. So then you have Ashanti people being brought over, Ga people being brought over. We know the story of Ya Santewa and how she rallied the women together to fight against Europeans when the men would not fight, and how she had the women withhold sex. We know this story of Ya Santewa. This is from that time period, right? We know the story of Nanny of the Maroons of Jamaica, and how she knew that she was from amongst those Ashanti people, and how she fought and created a settlement for Africans within Jamaica, right? And also Kojo, right, of the Maroons of this same. If you listen, these are Ghanaian names, right? This is the Akan language that these names come from. So that's that particular group of people. If you move on into the enslavement period, and when we think about the Angola and Congolese people, this actually stretched forward for a longer period of time. And so you then move forward. Okay, still making sure that everybody can hear me. Okay. So then you move forward and you see that that particular group of people then very much is the African people that peopled the low country. Your Gullah Geechee people. Gullah means Ngola, coming from Angola, right? So then we have the stories of Queen Nzinga and how she fought against the Portuguese, right? We have the creation of Palmares, which was a Ngola people and Akan people, right? We have this conglomeration of people, right? Palmares in Brazil, which was the first democratic society on this side of the globe created by Africans. The first democratic society was Palmares. The second democratic society was Haiti. Okay? All right. So you have United States of America was the third. The first was Palmares, the second was Haiti, United States of America was the third, and United States of America based its democracy off of Palmares, Haiti, and the Iroquois Confederation of Native Americans on this land, okay? All right, so we move then on a little bit more forward, and you have the fighting between the Fon Nation and the Onago Nation, right? So then this causes one of the last waves of enslavement of African peoples, where people were then brought here. Okay? So the reason for the differences in how we practice the tradition. So when you come to the United States, there is a particular way that Yoruba people from the United States, and yes, you can be Yoruba and from the United States, practice the tradition. There is a particular way. There is a particular way it is practiced in Cuba. There's a particular way it's practiced in Puerto Rico, in let's see, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Brazil, that I just mentioned, right? All of those ways are different. And all of those ways are different from how it is practiced in Nigeria. It is ignorance that causes people to say that one of these ways is correct and all of the other ways of doing it are incorrect. That's ignorance. Every Yoruba person has their root in the sacred. My ancestors brought here 500 years ago from the Ekiti region of Nigeria. Our sacred homeland is Ile-Ife. Okay? My ancestors and my brothers and sisters in Cuba, sacred homeland is Ile-Ife. Ancestors, my brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, in Brazil, sacred homeland is Ile-Ife. However, when we came here 500 years ago, the herbs that we had access to in Nigeria, the elders that we had access to in Nigeria, the lineage that we had access to in Nigeria, we no longer had access to. Adapted the tradition here. We also incorporated we incorporated them out of respect for the land upon which we stand. So yes, we incorporated tobacco. Yes, we incorporated rum. Yes, we incorporated gin. If you are in Nigeria, you have the luxury of still using palm wine. If you are in the United States, in some portions of the United States, palm trees do not grow. So we couldn't make palm wine. But if my ancestors were slaving on a cane plantation, then we had rum. And so we incorporated that. It is ignorant to say that only people from Nigeria are actually practicing the tradition. My ancestors were brought from Nigeria here, and we are practicing the tradition in the way that we had to practice it here. It is no less valid, it is no less correct, it is certainly no less powerful. This is what freed us from chattel slavery. So it is certainly no less powerful. It is ignorant to say people in the United States may practice the tradition, but only people in Cuba actually have Ashe. How is that possible? The history is exactly the same. We all come from the sacred homeland of Ile Ife. We were fighting, we were having a war, therefore we were captured by Europeans and our ancestors were brought here. We are in the belly of the ship together. I get dropped off in the United States and my sister gets dropped off in Cuba. So how is it possible with this exact same history that there is one place that suddenly what my sister had is better than what I had? This is an argument over who had the best oppressor. That's what you're arguing. You're arguing who had the best master. That's what you're arguing. If you're arguing that there's only Ashe in Nigeria, then you're saying because British masters are better than Portuguese masters. British masters are better than masters from the United States. British masters are better than masters from Ireland. That's what you're saying. If you're saying that only those who practice it in Nigeria are doing it correctly, because Nigeria was suffering under the same oppression that my ancestors were suffering under. So all that you're saying when you say the Ashe is only in Nigeria is that British masters are better. That's what you're saying. If you say the Ashe is only in Brazil, then you're saying Portuguese masters are better. If you say the Ashe is only in the United States, then you're saying United States masters are better. That's what you're arguing. The tradition is one. It is one tradition. The sacred homeland is, of course, Africa. The sacred homeland is, of course, Ile Ife. Of course, there is no doubt about that. But with the disbursement of West Africans throughout the globe, the Ashe that my great-great-grandmother had is not up for debate. If it was up for debate, I would not be sitting here before you today. Please do not require Africanness from anyone. Anyone that requires you to validate your Africanness as a Black person on this earth is ignorant. Do not listen to them. Do not attempt to validate your Africanness for them. They are operating from ignorance and white supremacy. And that's all that I have to say on that. I will forever and always pay homage to the sacred homeland of Ile Ife. Of course, that is where the tradition, that is where we began as a people. But the Ashe was dispersed with us as we moved out. And the tradition to whatever ecology our ancestors were living in. All right, so I'm done with that. Okanran, this is the beginning of the Merindilogun oracle. So when we look at the Merindilogun oracle, as I taught before, the term Merindilogun means 16 in the Yoruba language. 16 is a sacred number in the tradition of our ancestors, okay? So many things happen in sets of 16 within the tradition, okay? And so when we are in contact with the Merindilogun oracle, what we use to contact this oracle is 16 calories. The Merindilogun oracle is the oldest oracle that was used in the tradition. Other oracles come out of this oracle. All right. So the OB oracle, where we use 4 calories, that comes out of Dilogun. The Ifa oracle, where we use the Opwele chain, that comes out of Dilogun. Dilogun was the original oracle of the Yoruba people. All right. This is actually my favorite verse of Okanran. It's a very short verse, and so I will share it with you today. Okanran touches 20, Okanran touches 30. That which touches 30 touches 20. Very short. And it speaks of Orisha Osheregbo. This is one of the incarnations of Obatala. And he talks about when Orisha Osheregbo was moving along and he was going to buy new land. Sorry, you guys. I have my laptop is set up so the notifications come up and they will distract me. So I gotta X them out as they pop up. Talks about when he was going to buy new land and he went to get a divination to see what he needed to do in order to buy this new land. And the proverb that I just shared with you is the proverb that the diviner gave him and said, this is what you will have to use to be able to buy new land. So the diviner said, Okanran touches 20, Okanran touches 30. That which touches 20 touches 30. And Orisha, I have to keep looking at it because it's not a this is not a Rotable Batala that came over to the west, so I'm not familiar with it. Orisha Osheregbo realized that it was his associations that made him able to fulfill his destiny. So Okanran is one. It is singular. It is by itself. This is a rarity within ancient societies. For something to be singular, for something to be by itself is a rarity within ancient societies. And so sometimes was looked upon as dangerous, right? If you think about ancient societies, they were either hunting and gathering or they were agrarian, which means they were farmers, right? In order to succeed and do well in either one of those types of societies, you must have associations, right? In order to do well as a hunter or a gatherer, you must be associated with a group of people. In order to do well as a farmer, you must be associated with a group of people. So Okanran speaks about the dangers of being singular. So when we look at Orisha Osheregbo in this particular Itan, he is viewing himself as singular. And the diviner is reminding him that there is no way to fulfill your destiny as one single entity, as one single person. Reminds me of an Odu in which Orumala said, we must gather together as trees do to form a forest, because we are not blessed singly. We are only blessed in groups. Okay, so when we think about the Odu Okanran, that is what we are speaking about. Being the beginning, it is the first to appear. So being the beginning, it is the original, it is the first to appear, and therefore appears to be existing singly, appears to be existing by itself, as all of us appear to be existing by itself, right? When you look at me, you looking at me here on this screen, and I'm looking like just one thing, just one entity, just one human being, just one woman, right? That's what you think that you're seeing. But when you look at any single being, you are seeing at the very least 2 beings, right? When you look at me, well, 3. When you look at me, at the very least, you're seeing me, you're seeing my mother, and you're seeing my father. There's no way to look at me and not at least be seeing those 3 beings, right? So when you think about that, then you also have to think about when you look at me, you're seeing my mother and my father. Then you have to be seeing her mother and her father, his mother and his father. It goes back, right? My mother's mother and father each had mother and father. My father's mother and father each had mother and father. So even when you look at me and I appear to just be one thing, you oops, a lineage running all the way back to the beginning of time. So that is just biologically what you're looking at. Negasi, bring me the. So that's just biologically what you're looking at. So let's take it outside of biology and let's move into so when you look at me right now, I'm sitting here and I'm teaching you about the Merindilogun oracle. So if I'm able to sit here and speak, then once again, you're seeing my mother. Your mother is generally who you learn speech from. I'm able to sit here and teach you about the Merindilogun oracle. How do I know about the Merindilogun oracle? I know about the Merindilogun oracle because, thank you, can you plug it up for me? Go that way. When I was, let me get this plugged up or it will all be for naught, y'all. It'll just be gone. When I was a student, an undergraduate student at when I expressed my interest in African religion, his name was Ronald. He was not a doctor yet. So I pray that if that was his desire, that he got his PhD and continues to teach religion. So saw my interest in African traditional religion, and he directed me towards the Yoruba tradition. So when you look at me and you see me sitting here teaching you about the Merindilogun oracle, you're also seeing Professor Somerville, right? When I became interested in the tradition in the ancient tradition of my ancestors, I went to the bookstore there at Fisk University, and the only book they had on the subject was Mama Zora Ibara Tarun. Mama Zora's work, Tell My Horse. And so when you look at me and you see me sitting here teaching you the Merindilogun oracle, you're seeing Professor Somerville, you're seeing Mama Zora Neale Hurston, right? When I began to express to friends that I had my interest in the tradition, they introduced me to the sister who is the only Oshun priestess in Nashville at the time. And her name is Yeye Ola Oshun Elade Koju. And this was the first priestess that I ever met within the tradition and the first person who began to teach me about the tradition. So when you look at me and you see that I'm sitting here teaching you Merindilogun, and you are seeing Professor Somerville, you are seeing Ancestor Zora Neale Hurston, you are seeing Yeye Ola Oshun Olade Koju. That's who you're seeing. Yeye Ola Oshun Olade Koju introduced me to the Metahochi, Kofi Omowale Zanu, Ibara Tarun. So when you look at me and you see that I'm sitting here teaching you about Merindilogun, you are seeing my mother, because it is my mother who taught me to read, no, who taught me to speak. It is my older sister who taught me to read. So you're seeing my mother, you're seeing my older sister. You're seeing my grandmother who gave my mother a love of reading and of research, right? So that's another person. You are seeing Professor Ron Somerville, who introduced me to the tradition. You are seeing Yeye Olade Koju, Oshun Olade Koju, who was my first teacher in the tradition. You are seeing the Metahochi, Kofi Omowale Zanu, who was my godfather in the tradition, right? And on and on and on. So Okanran 1 touches 20. Okanran 1 touches 30. Right? 1. If it were just me, I would never have been introduced to Merindilogun. If I was never introduced to Merindilogun, I would not be Olaomi, and I could not be sitting here teaching the tradition to you. Right now, if I look on my screen, I have 17 people viewing this video. By the time viewed this video, it'll be 3, 4, 500 people have viewed this video. These people that I just told you had touched me, none of those 500 people that I will touch by tomorrow could be touched by what I'm saying. If it was just me, there would be no way for me to have been introduced to the tradition. What Okanran is teaching us, what the Orisha are teaching us in this particular verse of the oracle, is that it is through your influences, it is through your circle, it is through who you know and who touches you that you fulfill your destiny. And while you are fulfilling your destiny, you are touching everyone around you. You are influencing everyone around you, right? Okanran touches 1, Okanran touches 20, Okanran touches 30. That which touches 20 touches 30. It is through your circle. So when you think about that, when you contemplate that, when you consider that, our ancestors within Yoruba culture, Yoruba society, teach that the most important decision that you made before deciding to be born this time, because being born, my mother always taught us this, and my mother did not openly and actively and knowingly practice the tradition, but she taught us this from the time that we were small, that being born, the decision to be born was your decision. You decided to return to the world. Every time that you've lived, it has been your decision to return. Okay? It is not anyone else's decision. Not only that, you chose the gender that you were born into, whatever that is, whatever physical body you were born into, you chose that. You chose. Well, you don't get to choose your lineage, so you don't choose your ethnicity. From the perspective of our ancestors, you continue to be born into the same family. And you know that because you still look the same, right? I look like my mother, who looks like her mother, who looks like her mother. So obviously, we've always been born into this family because we look the same, right? That is what it means to inherit features, is that you still in this same lineage, right? Okay, so according to our ancestors, it is you who chose to be born. According to our ancestors, the most important decision that you made, the decision that influences your destiny the most, is who you chose to be your mother. Let that sink in. Mothers, let that sink in. Why did your children choose you? I always counsel mothers to mother as themselves. When your children, the spirit of your children, viewed you from the spiritual realm, they saw you living life as yourself. No matter what you were doing, sister. You might have been a crackhead, a literal crackhead. And that spirit saw you living life like that. And that spirit said, I want to go to her. That spirit chose you. You didn't choose it. The mother did not choose you. You chose your mother. Right? So when you are mothering, mother as you. That is who they expected to be with, is you, the essence of you. Right? So while your children should be part of what encourages you to live better, to live well, and to fully fulfill your destiny, Your children should not be an excuse to not live life as you. Be you. And they will love it. They love it. Because that's who they came to be with. If you love to have fun and to dance and to listen to music, your children expected you to do that with them, right? That was their expectation. They were born to you as you. So become your full self always. Grow, get better, evolve always, but do it as you, right? The most important decision was who you chose to be your mother. Regardless of how she was living, what circumstances she was in, that's who you chose. Because that is the person who would give you and teach you the lessons that you would need to learn to fulfill the destiny that you chose. So my relationship with my mother was not always the best. And people find that as a shock because I always speak of her with such adoration. And every child adores their mother. So I adore my mother. I continue to adore my mother for as an honored ancestor. But I adored my mother as a child. I adored my mother as a teenager, as a young adult, as a grown woman. Does that mean we always got along? Hell no, it don't mean that. How could it possibly mean that? She had a very dominant personality. I have a very dominant personality. People like that don't get along, right? So our relationship was not always the best. It was not always as kind or as loving or as nurturing. What I saw as nurturing as I would have liked for it to be. But it was exactly what I needed to fulfill this destiny that I'm not fulfilling. It was exactly what I needed to be the mother that I am to my children, right? That's why I chose her as a mother. And that doesn't excuse any sort of behaviors that your mother may have had that you know were negative behaviors. That's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you to do is to be honest with yourself about why you chose that particular person to be your mother, right? Because you could have chose one of your aunties, you could have chose one of your cousins, you could have chose somebody else in your lineage to be your mother, but you chose that person. It's the most important choice that you make before being born is who is going to be your mother. So in you as Okanran, in you as one, that is the first being that you touch, is your mother. You come out into the world. The next being that you touch is your father, your choice as well. After this, the other beings that you touch are your family. The other beings that you touch as one, as Okanran, are your community. All of these things influence not only who you are and how you conduct yourself, but what you achieve. So when you have the power to do so, choose very carefully and choose very wisely. It is those who are closest to you that will influence you the most, whether you are aware of it or not. When I was a little girl, when I was born, or maybe when I was very young, my mother became a Jehovah's Witness. So as a little bitty girl, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I remember being the one that they would send up to the door when we would go door to door to knock on the door because nobody was going to say no to a cute little girl, right? I remember that. So we were Jehovah's Witness up until the point that my mother's being herself got her disfellowshipped, I think is the term that Jehovah's Witnesses use. So my mother was disfellowshipped. And this meant that we were still supposed to go to the Kingdom Hall, but nobody was allowed to talk to us. So for a while we did that. We went to the Kingdom Hall, we were sitting in the back, and nobody was allowed to talk to us. And I was too little to fully understand that that was what was going on. And then I don't even think that if a little bitty girl talks to you, people probably were responding to me. But at some point, they became too much of a psychological burden for my mother. Of course, in fact, it is a form of abuse to put someone in that type of situation. And so we left, we left Jehovah's Witness, we left the Kingdom Hall. And after that, for many years, we didn't go anywhere. We didn't have a place that we went to worship. And then my mother found a spiritual home in Bethel AME Church. And so we became AME. So after that, my upbringing was AME, right? If you do not know about the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church was founded by Richard Allen, who was a very early Pan-Africanist here in the United States of America. He founded that church, and he also founded a society called the African Society. And these societies were based upon African values that he knew from having been an enslaved African. So both the church and that society were based upon those values. And so being raised as a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, I, as a child in that church, would do things like perform God's trombones. I would do things like my mother would put on Black History Month celebrations and teach us about the glories of what it meant to be of African descent, and we would, this was a part of being in our church. This was understood as part of worshiping, was this pride in being of African descent, right? So knowing me as you know me now, if that had not been my community from the time I was small, there would be no way that I could have become who you know me to be now. I would not have been able to fulfill this part of my destiny, right? As I left the African Methodist Episcopal Church to go and matriculate at Fisk University, that church, my church community, had expectations of me. They were proud to have a church member that was going to Fisk, because Fisk was a continuation of this same proud lineage of being of African descent and what you could achieve as a Black person in the United States. So they were proud to have a child that was going off to Fisk. I was given money and things like this to take to start school with. And my pastor gave me certain types of expectations. And I did not leave Fisk University until I had met all of those expectations. So what I'm showing you is how your community influences you and lets you know and will not allow you to be less than who and what you are, right? Okanran, I start off as one. I'm touched by my mother. I'm touched by my father. I'm touched by my siblings. I'm touched by the neighborhood that I live in. I'm touched by my outer community. I'm touched by my schoolmates, right? Okanran, 1 touches 20, 20 touches 30. Be aware of what community you gather around you. Be aware of the influence of the community that you gather around you. If you find that your community is not influencing you to be your best self, to fulfill your destiny, if your community is not pushing you to your own highest heights, then choose a different community once you have the power to do so. You're young. When you are at a certain age, you don't have the power to do so. So if you're too young to choose your community, then pray that the universe send you better influencers. If you're old enough to choose your community, then choose of people that push you and propel you to be your highest self. I have been a priestess of Oshun for almost 26 years now. And here in Nashville, there was not a very strong community of entrepreneurs. And so everything that I did as a teacher, everything that I did as a writer, everything that I did as a business owner, I did it small. But I had a vision of what I wanted to do with my business. Got to sneeze. Ooh, excuse me. So I prayed because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to achieve it. So as I prayed, as I asked the universe, as I asked the Orisha, as I asked the ancestors to send me people to influence me like this, then I began to meet entrepreneurs that did things big. First entrepreneur I met that always does everything in the biggest way possible was one of my very closest and most influential brother friends, Baba Danny Diallo Hines, very well known dancer throughout the United States and the Caribbean, from Barbados. And as I met him, I was so impressed by how big he always did everything. He carried and conducted himself as a big businessman. And so he influenced me in that way. And he was one of the first people to take me abroad, to do lectures abroad. So I had always done lectures around Nashville at the various universities and schools and high schools. But he was the first person to take me to Barbados. And I was doing lectures there for the government. There is a Pan African ministry as part of the government of Barbados. And so I did lectures for that particular ministry. So not only did he himself think big and see big, not only does he think big and see things from a big perspective, but he influenced me, and I prayed for that influence to do the same. So then when I get to Barbados, I meet people who then were just my friends, but who have now become my actual extended family, who also are entrepreneurs and who are doing things in a big way, in an influential way, working and operating and thinking as big business people. And so I am then influenced further through them to take my business to the next level, to live and treat my business as though I am a big business person, right? So I do this in Barbados. And I have this influence. And when you're around people like that, they have suggestions of things that you can do that you've never even dreamed of, you've never even thought of. So at one point, I lived in Barbados among these people, and I had all this beautiful, wonderful influence. I moved back to the United States, and I did not, once again, I didn't have that same type of influence. So I prayed for it. I asked the universe to send it to me. And the universe gave me the inspiration to move to Atlanta. And once I moved to Atlanta, I was once again immersed in a group of Black entrepreneurs who thought big and who did things in a big way and were always encouraging me to do the same. So that is just, it's another little story about how important your circle is. But not only that, how much power you have over who is in your circle. You have the complete and total power over that. You have complete and total control over that. Okay? Take it. Be responsible. Understand that that's your responsibility and your duty. Understand that if you want to fulfill your destiny, you are the one who must then call from the universe the people that you need to be around you in order to fulfill that destiny. If you find that the people around you are spending too much time with activities that you consider to be negative, then find another group of people to be around. If you don't see anybody that you would like to be around, pray. Ask the universe to send you a group of people that you would like to be around, a group of people that can help you, a group of people that can push you towards being your highest self. You feel and experience yourself as Okanran, as one. This Odu, this Etan, this verse house of your ancestors is reminding you that you touch 20, you touch 30, right? Which moves on and out to infinity. So all that you have to do is get yourself on the proper frequency to draw to you exactly what it is that you want and need. Okay, so this is the beginning of the Merindilogun oracle. This is Okanran. This is one. This is the beginning. Okay. All right, guys, our time together has come to an end. I am grateful for this opportunity to share with you, for this opportunity to sit before you and give a little bit of the wisdom that was given to me with regards to our tradition, the traditions of our ancestors. Please be mindful of what I said at the beginning of this broadcast. Do not participate in any sort of ignorance that divides up your influence according to who your oppressor was. We, as Black people, as African people, as West African people, were all and continue to be on some levels all oppressed. We were all taken away from the orthodox, pure form of our tradition. All of us were taken away from that during the time of colonialism, slavery, and neocolonialism. We were all removed from that. Whether we remained in Nigeria, which isn't even a place, that's not what we called that place, right? So whether we remained in Nigeria or whether we were forcibly removed and brought to the West, we were all stripped away from the purest form of our tradition. So no one at this point is practicing it in its purest form. Everyone is practicing it in the best way that our ancestors could during those particular hardships and hard times. As such, no one has a patent on the purest form of it because none of us have the luxury of continuing to practice that. All right? It is ignorant to say and to think and to believe otherwise. If you say and think and believe otherwise, your belief has no basis in historical fact. So you are welcomed actually to believe anything, but belief exists where knowledge is absent. So please don't participate in that ignorance. Please understand that your way of practicing the tradition of your ancestors in the Western world is just as valid and just as African and just as Yoruba as someone else's way of practicing the tradition in Nigeria. Their way is valid as well. Their way is African as well, and their way is Yoruba as well, as is your own. Do not blaspheme and commit treason against your ancestors who suffered so much by saying that they didn't have Ashe. They didn't carry with them the power to make things happen. And so I have to go all the way somewhere else because only that group of people carries Ashe. Don't commit treason against your ancestors by saying or believing or participating in that. Always pay homage to our divine source and our home and our spiritual place of origin as well as physical, which is of course Ile-Ife. But do not believe that someone else's ancestors had more power than yours. Because if that were true, you would not be sitting here. You would not exist. If your ancestors did not have Ashe, they could not have survived. All right, I'm not gonna say no more on that, but the backbiting and the infighting and the ridiculousness of it has completely gotten on my nerves. And so I had to speak on it. All right, you guys, we will be back here next Sunday. I think I'm going to do one more verse of Okanran before we move on to the next verses in Merindilogun. Peace, love, light, darkness, ecstasy, abundance, and bliss. To all within the sound of my voice that are wishing the same for me and mine, and as always, the lessons of life to those who are wishing us otherwise.